Hello, bonjour, goeiedag, dumela, legai, salibonani, linjani, magadi, mulishani, mulibwanji, habari. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuned in from. Thank you for joining me again for episode 8. This is Get to Know Them. These are Ego Wings facilitators. These are different men and women that impact our lives. They change our lives. They help us think outside the box. They help us to just look at life in a very different light and also to change our mindsets. My name is Candy and I'm your host. So this is episode 8. Can you imagine episode 8? They do say when you have such a good time, time flies. So if you haven't actually had a moment to look at the other 7 facilitators, please visit any of the social media sites of Ego Wings and you will get to know who these people are. Today, nevertheless, I am joined by an incredible, phenomenal gentleman. He is one of those people that makes mathematics very easy. He talks about investments like it was as easy as drinking a glass of water. He is fun to listen to, he's engaging, and he makes it easy, even when you think it is not possible to save or invest, especially during these times. Though today we're not here to talk about what he does in his professional space or when you see him on stage. Today we're here to dive in and to get to know who is this person? What does he do for fun? What does he like? And just what tickles his fancy? So allow me to welcome this amazing gentleman. And by the way, the gentleman I'm speaking to is no other than Jito Kayumba. Jito, thank you so much for making the time. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Candy. And how are you doing?
Not bad, thank you. Not bad. It is lovely to see you in that African attire. Yes.
Well, thank you. I like to honor our heritage every week, a couple times, usually Fridays. So yeah, and I managed to convince some colleagues in the office to do the same thing. People from different ethnicities, backgrounds, races are wearing African attire. So it's a proud moment,
Well done. Good on you.
Yeah. I like
that because your office is so diverse. You've got so many different people from. So you mean everybody is now getting into the habit of wearing African attire?
I'll say about 50% are doing that. Yeah, so it's good to see. But sometimes it's random, where we become more relaxed. We used to be very buttoned up from, Monday to Thursday. So Friday would loosen up. But then now, because of where our office sits, we sit in a forest, basically, in the sort of northern part of Lusaka, just after Roma, which is a very lovely, serene area that we've managed to acquire and then develop a pretty interesting office setup. So that it's more like a feel like you're at a campus. When you look at how these companies like Google and Apple, they've got these amazing offices where there's a lot of creativity. The character of the business is seen in the architecture, the feng shui, the design. And that's the type of energy we have here. So I'd like to apply that also in the way we carry ourselves or our clothing. So we don't have to take ourselves too seriously, even though we are an investment firm. We want to maintain the demeanor of, we can get things done, but we can be ourselves. We can be free, we can be happy, and we can really, celebrate our individuality. And part of my individuality is celebrating being an African. So yeah, that's pretty much part of the ethos.
I love that. I love that. So anyway, you've given us a little bit of a sneak peek of what you do in terms of your professional space. But today, all of us cannot wait to dive into your life. And thank you for opening that door for us. We would like to know, so what is Jito all about? Who is Jito?
Well, I think fundamentally who I am, what drives me is, obviously I'm a Zambian, citizen. I was born many people always wonder, like, how old is this guy? But I was born exactly 38 years ago. And basically grew up in Lusaka and then moved to the Copperbelt province, and, when I was a kid, my parents had split. It happens, it's normal. So during that period of time, I lived with my grandparents. And that was an interesting experience, being in another sort of town, smaller town, being with extended family for a period of time, gave me different perspective on life, helped me appreciate various diversities of people. I went to, my primary school there, and then, later on, when my parents, when my father remarried, I moved back to Lusaka, and it was interesting because I grew up in a military home, right? My father actually was a soldier, or he's retired now, but he was an active sort of officer in the Zambia Air Force, and it was interesting to grow up in his home, and basically I got to know him from the time I was. When I say got to know him, obviously I knew him from birth, but because we lived in different towns, my coming to know him as somebody who lived in the same home was around the time I was about 9. So that was also helped define me, because I was always eager to appreciate his perspective, and also it made me really appreciate structure. And the reason I mentioned growing up in a home led by a military individual, you become appreciative of this is going to make me sound very rigorous or rigid, but you appreciate order, you appreciate hierarchy, discipline, decorum, regiment, things like that. And this is something that I feel has helped shape me in my life in terms of being an organized person. So that came from that. And then really, but I think fundamentally, without having to go into my whole life story, I think to address a key part of your question of who is Jito, I think I'm a person who considers myself, nobody ever says they're humble, because it's not a sign of humility for a person to say they're humble, but I like to believe that I am. And the reason I believe that I'm humble is the fact that I believe that everything that I am, everything I've accomplished, is really by the grace of God. I believe that I'm not equipped with all the what they call it, intelligence or natural attributes that makes a person successful. I've always been curious. I've always inquired, how do I do X, Y, Z? And the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of success is something that also defines me. It's a continuing process. I don't feel like I've arrived, even though by any sort of measure within the Zambian context, people can say like I'm a successful person. But frankly speaking, I'm so far from where I desire to be. So I will continue to seek that. And I love people. I love to connect with people, and I love to create value. And value is created by creating businesses, investing. And that's really part of my ethos. And the last point I'll make with regards to what defines me, who I am, is the fact that, my life probably changed the most at the time where I went to study in Canada. So I went away. I was about 17 years old. I went to Canada, and when I got there and I saw the world from a different perspective, first of all, you're struck by the level of development that's in the Western world. And then you compare with where you're from and you realize how far back you are. That's the first thing. The second is you get to see how people in that part of the world perceive, people like yourself being an African and where you come from. And you realize that not only are you far back, but the people that side don't have much reverence or respect or sense of appreciation of your humanity. I mean, you see that in racism, you see it in patronizing behavior, you also see it in international trade policy, investment, and so on. This continent is treated as a basket case of people who are just impoverished. There's so much disorganization and war and all these negative elements that puts us where we are, or how we are seen in the rest of the world. So that made me feel that I owe it to, it almost, let me put it this way, it made me frustrated. In many instances, it made me angry, but I wanted to turn that anger into something positive. And I began to work in such a way that I wanted to improve myself to such an extent that by the time I got back home, the plan was always to come back home. That everything I do is to be part of the development, the growth, the transformation of this part of the world. So that ultimately, in a generation from now, I could look back and say, you know what, I played my part. I helped stimulate growth so that because at the end of the day, it comes down to dignity. I want to get to a point where when one is engaging with an African, whether they're in Washington, D.C., whether they're in Toronto, London, wherever, they should appreciate that Africans are people worthy of dignity, respect, and so on, whose humanity should be appreciated, and that we are beautiful, we are capable, we are worthy of things that is not seen to be what we're worthy of, right? Because there's this expectation that we're poor and all these things. So for me, it's being part of the change that we need to see in this continent. And that's ultimately what defines me. When I get up in the morning, what gets me excited about what I do, what makes me sort of look at finance and investment in a very, of course, it's a very technical field. It requires a lot of knowledge, but I try to simplify it to give it a strong sense of understanding and humanity and ease because of how much I love it. And I think the more you understand something, the simpler you can make it look. You distill its complexity into simplicity. And that's really, who I am and what I'm about.
Wow. Okay, so there are two things that I want to dive into there, that you just gave us as an answer. The first one is you come from a military background. Now, I am asking you this because one of my uncles was also very military, and all my cousins from there are not as relaxed as you've come out. They have, it's like they carry on this whole hierarchy, and they're very strict and they are very prim and proper, but you are so relaxed. You are, you're a bubbly person. Not until you said it, I would never have guessed it. So how have you managed to do that, to maintain the discipline and everything else, but just to be relaxed? How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, I think, life, I believe, is a balance. I feel, being, how do I say, highly regimented or disciplined, structured is very important. But at the same time, human beings, I won't say flawed in a sense that we are not able to fulfill those, but to a large extent, we need to be fluid. We need to go with what we feel in some instances. And I think that's what makes us less likely to be, to go through, the depression or to go through instances where we are feeling inadequate or having issues. So the way I address life is from two fronts. From a professional front, I think that's where the discipline is applied. Whether it be, ensuring that work gets done in a certain way, you're achieving your objectives, your targets, you're communicating the right way to your team, you're fulfilling expectations, you're leading the operation the way it's meant to be led. So that's where I'd say I wouldn't call it military-like discipline, but I would say just discipline from my understanding of what discipline should look like comes from. And perhaps a lot of that is influenced by that military history. But, moving into the relaxed sort of mentality is I'm relaxed about not work, but relaxed about, other elements of life, right? I feel like I have a strong appreciation of people. I try to maintain a great amount of empathy. If, the feeling of the people around me, what's making them tick. It helps me observe life around me. It helps me appreciate everything that's happening around me. And I think the more calm I am, and the more it enables me to be more emotionally intelligent. And with that, and when knowledge, and I'm a consumer of knowledge. And this is why, I speak, professionally, as you know, I'm able to speak in a room of whatever, 10,000 people. I mean, I've never spoken before 10,000, but a significant number of people. I hope I feel like I look forward to the day that I can speak, in front of tens of thousands of people, inspire them, get them excited. I feel like part of the energy it takes to come out strong, deliver a strong message, or the energy it takes for you to achieve insane goals and targets is where you preserve energy at times. I'm a huge believer in the preservation of energy. I don't think about petty things. I don't get into arguments. I don't get flustered because so a calm demeanor or a relaxed looking demeanor is really a mindset of making a choice that, I'm going to address something without taking it too seriously because it actually isn't too serious. People get worked up about money. People get worked up about many things. I talk a lot about saving and so on. So a person might say, so let me give you an example of the level of discipline I have on various elements of my life. I could say I'm off alcohol for a year and I'll go off alcohol for a year. I could say I'm not going to eat meat for life. I've not had meat in 2 years. That was a decision I made 2 years ago. I became vegan, right? So that's part of discipline. I could be cool about it. Other people be like, I can never do that. That is unbelievable. I love steak. I'm like, well, good for you. That's fine. And there's no judgment on anybody who does those things. But for me, it's in doing hard things, I take it easy because I've come to appreciate that these same hard things are what creates greatness. That's what creates great health, great mindset, great achievement. I go to the gym, people ask me, like, I've transformed over the years. I used to be a little bit chubby, but now I've become a lot more muscular, which is nice. It's great for confidence. It's also nice to be strong. It's nice to be fit and those things. And what that has done for me is phenomenal. And it's worth the sacrifice of, doing an hour a day for 5 days a week. Again, that goes back to discipline. But my attitude towards it will be, I can laugh about it, whether it's before going to the gym or after, but I've done the work because there's an appreciation of the output, of the outcome of it, the result of it. So that really, I would say, explains the balance between being calm, relaxed, and also being extremely disciplined, because the calm itself is a result of the discipline. If I would make one last point, one of my favorite sayings is, if money could talk, it would say, save me today and I'll save you tomorrow. When my friends, as I came up in my career in the early days and started making some money, friends would go out partying, drinking, buying fancy cars. I was that one guy who would skip a number of nights of the hangout sessions, the drinks, and I had a very basic vehicle, lived a very basic life, lived under my means. Everybody was trying to prove something to everybody else. Later on, as I was accumulating resources because I was saving, and I was, it got me to a point where I had accumulated a sufficient amount of reserve funds, that I had the freedom to invest, the freedom to do certain things, that it enables you to be calm, to be playful, because again, that is the fruit of discipline, so ultimately that's how I like to appreciate the two factors.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. Yeah, I'm really enjoying these episodes. So my next question is also part of the answer that you gave when you went to Canada to school, and you're so right. Being 17, being looked at, and I'm sure you're one of those very early Africans who were among, the indigenous, we'll leave it at that. But so how did you cope with that? Would you say it's part of the reason why it has helped you to be who you are today, being calm? Yes, I think you are very calm because you knew what to do right in terms of saving and whatnot. I think most people are in chaos, or, they panic because money is what we use to sort of survive. So you got it right 100%. From the get-go. But with you, would you say being there helped you be this relaxed, easy, fun person when you need to be fun, and also sort of identified areas that you needed to identify yourself in? How did you cope at 17? How did you manage that?
So first of all, it is a process. So when I first got there, I'll be very open and honest with you. I'll be a bit vulnerable. When I arrived in Canada, first of all, I was eager to get there. I was eager to be part of this incredible world that's developed, this world where so much is going on, where there's so much advancement, and so I can advance myself, improve myself, and to be a more valuable person. My first 2 years were very difficult. I think culture shock hit me. It was very difficult in the beginning to make friends, to connect with people. You're a kid, you're a teenager, you're trying to make sense of the world. For the first time in your life, you're meeting what they call racism, right? What we watch today on the news, today you hear, oh, George Floyd, this person, that person gets killed by police, beaten by this person. Just the other day, a guy was walking down the street in a neighborhood and he gets accosted by an individual who basically told him he's not supposed to be there. And you could see the anger that the other one person had to this Black youth because he happened to be in the wrong neighborhood. But the fact of the matter is, what that does to you psychologically, it breaks you down. It makes you angry. It makes you feel as if you're worthless. And I think it has a huge impact on your self-esteem, an impact on your sense of, even your confidence and all those factors. It inhibits you from being able to create value, for you to pursue good things, for you to even pursue entrepreneurship, be academic, because you're thinking, well, I'm worthless. The rest of the world looks down on me. My life is not worth anything because I just saw a cop beat up somebody looks like me. I get pulled over all the time. You see that. I imagine you're coming from Zambia, right? Or Sub-Saharan Africa, where people of your complexion are the majority. And then when you go there and you face that, and for the first time you become aware of your of your color, right? And because that's been society has told you like you are different, you know. So the feeling of walking into an elevator and a lady clasping her handbag because she thinks I'm gonna steal it. I'm just like, what the heck? Like, so you now start to look down on yourself because you're a kid. You're still trying to make sense of the world. So then it changes you. You become rebellious. So I went through a period. So the first thing that happened was I was depressed that period because again, all that also emotionally broke me down. Even though my goal for being there was to go to university to learn. And I think my first year, my grades even suffered because again, I was struggling to cope. And then of course it was cold. There's so many factors that hit me. So that year was a very important year of reflection, introspection. I spent lots of time on my own. I listened to a lot of Tupac. That's how I think I coped, you know, because he talked about things that I was experiencing. And in a way, it was a form of catharsis, you know. So going after feeling depressed, feeling so bad, having a low self-esteem, you get to a point, there was a breaking point where I just made a decision one day. I said, you know what, I can't continue feeling sorry for myself. I need to look at the world differently. The only way I could win, and I don't know where this came from, to be honest, because it wasn't a person or anything. It could have been the voice of God telling me that, look, you need to just overcome this. Realize that, you know, the world won't change for you. You can change to affect your surroundings. Be thoughtful about the people you engage. Build emotional intelligence. Build understanding of society you live in. Understand that if you are broken down by the negative elements of society, it means that it has defeated you. So don't allow it to defeat you. The only way you can overcome it is through excellence. And I began to focus on excellence. I began to read more, began to make interesting friends, people. And, you know, it hurt me a lot less because then I began to understand, like I'd meet someone, let's say they do something that's negative. I think my skin thickened, I would say. And what that did, and when I think of the transition, it was a complete polar opposite. You go from a negative position where you're emotionally drained to all the way to the other side, because I became more forceful, more confident. I began to laugh at things that used to bother me because I realized how absurd they were. And I think that level of enlightenment made me so calm and made me so happy because it enabled me to achieve. Then the results began to show. The results were great grades, great friends. I used to date. Different people from different parts of the world. I used to party and have fun. I became a very influential member of the student community. I became, president of the African Students Association. I started doing events. I started, making money from just things. I'd wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to teach a cooking class for African food. People in a room of 50 people come and pay, $10 each to come and learn how to cook African food for like an hour. And I'd do that every week and make a bunch of money. I basically, I shot a movie because, I just felt like I could. So it made me brave. It made me fearless. And it made me overpower all the negative things that were happening around me. And it was validation that I am worthy. And I've maintained that spirit ever since, because again, the results spoke for themselves, that I wouldn't care. If somebody looks down on me, I'd realize that, you know what, it's not my problem, it's their problem. They have an issue that they're having to deal with by looking at me that way. So by excelling, I realized that then all the things that I felt made me feel so low, whatever the case may be, or the things that affect most people who are Black, particularly in that part of the world, I realized I was able to transcend that. Of course, the systemic limitations exist, but the more, how do I say, the more excellent you are, right? The more knowledgeable you are, the more valuable you are, then those things fall away. I'll give you one example before concluding the point, is Obama. As I was wrapping up my stay in Canada, so I did my degree, stayed a couple of years, actually worked. Obama was running for president. I think he launched his campaign in 2007. And I remember thinking how impossible it would be for a guy like him to win. But then I just remembered how he was so on the ball. He was emotionally intelligent. He was not affected by all sorts of negativity that was thrown at him. He was winning hearts through ideas, through his great ability to speak, his ability to engage with people, his empathy, his desire to change the healthcare system, to unite the country, to bring a new style of politics, do all these things. And the manner in which he moved and continued to grow and win primaries, and then ultimately became the nominee for the Democratic Party, and then went on to win the election. To me, that's the blueprint of how to be in the midst of such difficulty, even in the midst of being a minority who's somewhat downtrodden or perceived a certain negative way. That ignore the noise, ignore negativity, the insults, and pursue the goal. All those are just obstacles trying to break you from your journey, from your destiny. And so really, why am I relaxed, right? And when you mentioned relax, I'm even thinking like, hey, am I that relaxed? And maybe bubbly, as you put it, or happy. I feel like I'm a happy person because I do look at the world from that prism. There's a certain, it's almost like you know a secret that not everybody else knows. You're sitting in the room looking around, there's chaos, people are struggling, you hit left, right, and center, and you're sitting there and you know exactly what's making everybody tick. And you're excited because you know that knowledge, the power of the knowledge that you have and the utilization of that knowledge is what will make the environment around you move. So that you can do one thing and it stipulates whether it be behavior. You can, it's, so yeah, and which leads me to one of my favorite words. I think this is the last point I'll make to address your question. I love being perspicacious, right? And it makes me excited. And for those who will be listening, who need to go check the dictionary, perspicacious, I'll save you that effort. It essentially means being enlightened, being fully knowledgeable, and being highly resourceful. It's a combination of that, where you're so in the know, in the realm in which you sit, that knowing makes you less afraid. Because I think part of what makes people flustered or just tight, how do I say, rigid or be stressed is the fear of the unknown. It's the fact that there's a level of confusion of, okay, I've got so much on my plate, so much needs to get done. But when you zoom out and take a sense of, okay, this is what's in my hands, I'm not going to do X, Y, Z because that's not my skill set. I'm going to have somebody else do that. And by the way, that's another thing I've become really good at, is delegating certain tasks to people who are much more knowledgeable than me in that, and being humble enough to accept that, look, you know what, I'm not good at that. So you take that and I'll pursue what it is that I am, good at. So yeah, so I'd say that's the somewhat long explanation of, of how I'm going to address your question.
Jito, thank you so much for being so open and honest and just being so authentic, with what you've shared. It's not a lot of people that can actually break it down the way you have, because we look at you, we just see that you're prim and proper. We don't know that you also went through these challenges. Just to close this, I cannot not ask you this. Jito, we are in a time where technology is brilliant. That's what we are using nowadays to survive. But at the same time, it's very detrimental. It's up to an individual to be able to choose how to use it and to know, like you say, to block out the noise and to use it wisely. So our younger people are really suffering, Jito. There's peer pressure. The girls have got, not even the girls, it's not even so much about the girls, both girls and boys are under a lot of peer pressure. Whether it's at school, whether it's at university, even in work situations now, you are having the topic of mental health coming up quite a lot, where people are hyperventilating before they go into an office, because there's also, look, I'm going to just say it as is, there's also bullying. People would assume there's no bullying in an office, but there is. So just from you, I love the word that you said, you have a secret, because you can see the noise around you. You smile to yourself saying, I know what this noise is all about. If only they could maybe turn the knob to a 5, they will calm down. So just before I go to my next big question to you, what advice would you give to people that are going through what you went through, whether they're starting in a new country, at a new school, even in a new environment, a new office? What's that one thing that you feel they need to know to be able to get up? Because the example you gave about your life and the stress you went through, the depression you went through for the first 2 years, and the choice you made, it was a decision you made. The choice you made to say enough is enough, and just how you turned it around and drew people to you. And the Obama, scenario that you gave as well, trust me, I too thought, what's this guy thinking in the US? But he shocked all of us and he taught us something new. So please, in closing with this topic, please just help all of us who are listening in. What should we do? What's that one thing that you would say we should do?
If I were to summarize it to one thing, I would say to pursue excellence. Because excellence at the end of the day is what makes people relevant. People are in pursuit of these things, right? In order for us, and when you talk about mental health, you talk about social media, you talk about bullying, all these factors, it's all about validation. People chase likes, right? Maybe they'll post something on, whatever, Instagram, Facebook, hoping that they'll get a whole bunch of likes, right? So then what will happen is if somebody doesn't get those likes, then they feel like, well, I'm not worthy. Of course, there's different reasons why someone gets likes. Sometimes it's based on looks, popularity for various reasons, having, and so on and so forth. But the main issue there is for one to recognize, what am I good at? And not only what am I good at, in fact, okay, let me break it down in a couple of ways. So one, I said, is pursue excellence. Everybody's good at something. Everyone has, I've read this somewhere, Michael Jordan level talent at something. It could be writing, it could be, medicine, it could be whatever, cooking, accounting, you name it. There's something that everybody has that enables them to essentially become successful in something. And that's the thing they should focus on. That will essentially validate them, because it's the self-satisfaction that will come from that. And then the rest of the world can either recognize it or not. And the second point is we need to recognize that our self-importance should never be dependent on how others perceive us, because we live in a world where people have different reasons for why they want to look down on us. You have to remember that looking down on somebody else or pulling someone down is an act of weakness. It's an act of desperation for someone to feel big. So if somebody comes and insults you, bullies you, or says something negative, just know that they themselves are coming from a bad place. They're in a bad situation. And once you recognize that through a form of empathy, it makes you less upset about the things that they do to you. So I think having that sense of knowledge on the emotional stability or lack thereof, or instability of somebody else, it does really put you in a much more healthier mind frame. So really, and on the last point, it sounds cheesy, it sounds more like something that's been said over and over again, but people have to learn to love themselves truly. And I think loving oneself comes from really that sense of appreciation of who we are as individuals, whether it be our culture. People have, like I can tell you, there's a lot of broken people who've been through so much from a family perspective. Historically, maybe they went through some sort of abuse, emotional, physical, or they went through poverty, or they went through a very difficult sort of period, difficult history that makes them feel that they're less than. But then, when you think of the story of people like Oprah, I think she's a perfect example of somebody who went through not only poverty, but all sorts of abuse, racism, all those factors. She was able to overcome that because she pursued excellence. And all the things that made her weak ended up being what made her strong. So we have to then reflect on, what is it that makes us weak? What is it that makes me feel like I'm less than? And use that pain to become your purpose in overcoming. And I think it takes a choice, it takes a decision, and I think it's very important. So if people are walking by and waving.
No, please, it's fine. It's fine. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. All right. No worries at all. So anyway, I'll say that that's the concluding point, is how to deal with it. And that's how I dealt with these issues. And success will follow. Validation will follow. Not necessarily from others, but self-fulfilling validation. So you know what? This has proven that I can create value. The world needs, we are all relevant in the world. In fact, there's something else I was going to say, which is very important, is, relevance is something that we all want. We want significance. We want to be appreciated. And all that is, I guess, can be summed up in, we want to be loved, right? I think it's natural, innate thing that human beings want. We want love, we want companionship, we want all those factors, but typically it's for validation, and it's sort of validation that enables you to feel appreciated and all those things and be relevant. Other than that, then it's going to make us feel less than. It all comes down to self-esteem. So, I would certainly say that it takes time, but in due course, people will recognize their value if they really focus on looking within and not listening to any external negativity. Because 90% of, usually self-talk is negative. Usually people say, can I do that? No, I probably can't. But turning that around and having a positive mental mindset, positive mindset is, I would say, is one of the key things to do. Not easy, but, it's about making a conscious decision to make it happen.
Jito, thank you so much for this particular point. I'm actually thinking I should bring you back for more of these chats. My next question, my key question, Jito, is what do you like? What do you love?
You know what? I love learning. I love learning new things. So, first of all, I think my life really evolved so much around my work because my work is connected to my purpose. My purpose is basically, accumulating knowledge. And I think I've gotten to a point where I've accumulated a significant amount of knowledge that's relevant to the work that I do, especially when it comes to building businesses, building the mindset, the mentality, the skills that make you a great business person. Because ultimately, building businesses should create wealth, because it's not just about wealth for the sake of creating wealth so that one can be rich and all that stuff. It's about, impacting the community, being able to create jobs that enables the livelihoods of people to be uplifted. Because I also believe so much that, the term Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. If my neighbor, if my family member, people in my community are crying, are starving, it's going to affect me one way or another, whether I like it or not. I may be in a nice air-conditioned office, in a nice air-conditioned car. For as long as that person on this roadside is starving, there are circumstances, whether I like it or not, there's something about the ecosystem of life, of a society, that one thing affects the other. And I can mention to you things like crime, for example. Because of ignoring the plight of other people in the community, it will affect our sense of security. We put up walls because we're trying to protect ourselves from those who are without resources. When people are going through difficulty, depression, sadness, and so on, they will act out in various ways. They might become internet trolls. They're the ones who will create fake accounts and insult people and make fake stories, because that's how they pursue their catharsis. That's how they pursue a way in which they deal with their problems. But if we can be more concerned about the well-being of people around us, it actually makes our world, our life, a lot better. In my office, the way I engage with people, for example, it fulfills my pursuit to be happy requires for me to make sure that people around me are happy, because it will affect me if people aren't. If one person, let me give you a classic example. A friend of mine was very surprised. I was in a restaurant having dinner with a friend, and I remember he ordered something, and the waitress, first of all, was very just disorganized and took long, forgot one order, and then ended up being rude. And he was just livid, like, I'm not going to tip you. I stopped him. I asked him, let me ask her a question. I said, is everything okay at home? And then she literally was about to break down. She almost had the sense like I knew her story. Because I knew that when somebody is acting out in a negative way, in a rude way, it's not my problem. There's something in their life that's affecting them. It turned out that I think she lived with a boyfriend who was beating her, something along those lines. Obviously, I'm not mentioning any names, so I'm not, airing the laundry. This was a couple of years ago. And when we spoke to her, I said, listen, at the end of this, I want to hear more about this. You're having a difficult day. We'll still tip you properly. So look, just, take a moment, come back and let's go over where there's been a mistake. But I understand why you're having a difficult time, why you forgot, and why you basically acted out the way you did. And we forgive you. Every time we go to that restaurant, the way she runs to me to serve me, it's incredible. I get the best service. It's almost a selfish act. To be kind to somebody else is actually, it sounds like it's altruistic, but actually it serves you because that person you treat you even better, which makes your life even better. So when you ask me the question, what do I like? I like things that are associated with my purpose, lifting people up, building people up, creating an environment sorry, that creates value for the community, for society, that creates a better sort of, yeah, I'd say a better society. I know it sounds very idealistic, but that's what I love. People are my passion, and everything that makes people be in a better situation work. And it's reflected in, I'll give you an example. I'm kind of going on, but I think it's relevant. When people see that tweets are going out every day, right? I'm doing 4 or 5, whatever. And people wonder, like, how do you keep up every day, 365 days a year, original content? How do you keep up with that? I said, I'm obsessed, not with the platform itself, but with the idea of I'm giving people free knowledge. There's 90% of people will go over their heads. A significant number might even be offended, may not even like me for that. But there's also going to be a good number who it will hit them where it needs to be hit, in the heart. It will change the manner in which they live. It will make them better human beings whether it be personal relationships, within their work, maybe enable them to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. And to me, that's part of my purpose. So what I like is to do anything that's associated with my purpose.
Wow. All right. I am I am in awe. Look, you are one of a kind, Jito. The fact that you are into investment and you are this kind of person who puts other people first. We have this thing of judging a book by its cover, unfortunately. And I think 90% of the people in your field are so rigid. It's about, you don't find that they're loving, they're giving, they're caring like that. So when you are employing people or when you are looking for friends, do you just do you find that you attract people that like you, or what do you just bring in everybody, then you start to seed them out? How do you have friends? How do you deal with the friends? Because friends can be a challenge. Like you said, you gave an example at school where some just want to party. It's about party. You're focused. So how do you sieve them out? Are you quick to say, thanks a lot, maybe next time? Or how do you do it? Do you try and change them, help them? What do you do?
I think at a certain point in your life, you basically, the older one gets, the less likely they are to make new friends. Because usually, the people who become lifelong friends typically will come from maybe the teenage years, because there's a shared history, or even in our 20s, there's a certain, point in which when we're discovering ourselves, building our social, our social patterns, our hobbies, people who find alignment during that period of time. There are people later on you'll find who, because again, the reason I think it's harder to make friends later is because, we harden as people with time. So I'll give you an example. The human brain is as incredible as it is, it's finite in its capacity. It gets to a point where there's limitations. It's like a hard drive. There's only so much you can download onto a certain hard drive. It gets limited. The younger we are means it's more open. Have you noticed that you remember names of people you went to high school with? You remember names of people in university or in the early 20s or thereabouts. Yeah. But when you meet somebody let's say after 35 or thereabouts, you find that you won't remember the name because so much more has occupied your brain, whether it be the things that matter to you within your immediate space, because there's so much, we're downloading information every day, new information from whether it be, like right now we're in the COVID world, or people are learning new things academically or professionally. So what then happens is you get to a certain point where, because you've hardened, you've gotten all the information that you feel you need, you're less prone to be curious or excited about, one, meeting new people, but two, you're almost set in your ways. You're less trusting because you've been through so much. You've been burnt, you've been heartbroken, you've been betrayed. All those factors come in. So we have more trust issues later in life than we have early in life. We're more idealistic when we're young because we have hope and faith in people. We expect good in people. So we're more vulnerable. We open up a lot better. So in answering your question, how do I, see people? So one thing is I think there's friends for different things as well. I'm a believer that it's okay to party. It's okay to have a drink. It's okay to do all those things. I have friends who are complete focused, academic people. There are some who are more professional people who are very focused on that. They don't do anything else. Some are very religious. They fulfill a relevant part of my life, and because I believe in balance. There are friends who love to party, and I'll call them up and say, "Hey, I'm going out to the club. Let's go, have fun," and that's okay as well, because in that context, they're the best people they could be, especially for me, in that particular moment. And there's some who I'll bounce investment ideas off of. I can have a conversation about politics and philosophy with others. So I think there's a diverse array of people I've come to know who become very good friends. And I think we become good at discerning based on just small reactions. Robert Greene calls them micro reactions. You can tell from a person's face whether they like you or not. There are people in life who, again, sadly won't like you, or some who secretly dislike you, or don't want to be in your life. And again, I think one last point I'll make, which is relevant to the question you've asked, is you also find that there are people who want to be in your life not for the right reasons, especially when you get to a certain level of perhaps success, right? Because people want certain things, people are aspiring. So if they feel that you've got resources or you've got a certain amount of power, like I'm a corporate guy who sits on a number of boards. So I could move things in the corporate world, just sitting on these big company boards. So you find that some people want to get close because they're interested in a job or, interested in a deal or something like that. And then the moment they see that you can't give them that, then they go cold on you because you're no longer relevant to you. So they, or you're no longer relevant to them. Or then you also find that, people's loyalty is largely connected to what you can do for them. And the reality is in the world, there are not a lot of people who are genuine, who just genuinely like you. Yes, it's also normal, it's okay. And I'm a huge believer that we all have relevance based on the value we bring to the world. And that's fine. And again, friendship is also an exchange of value. I mean, so the sincere friend who listens, who's there when you're feeling low, who can talk you through a difficult moment, whether it be a bereavement or something like that, are not many. So, and of course we learned with time, but I would say keep an open mind because people will surprise you, even positively. And let's not put our guards up too much, because when we put our guards up in relation to people, it blocks the blessing that they have been sort of instructed to bring into your life, right? I know I'm getting a bit spiritual here, but I get the sense that there are people are what really are part of the dots that connect us to the things that will make us succeed or enable us to fulfill the destiny that we have set in our path. So with that being the case, I love to get to know people. And the moment I see the signs that this is a negative person, whether it be they're dishonest or, because these clues always come in your face. And when those clues come, then I'm very smart about not being, available, accessible to that person or just deliberately. Yeah. And, the good thing is people have pride. So when they kind of see that, oh, you're not responsive or you're, or something along those lines, they tend to just back down and not want to act like they're begging you, so that's part of my discerning mechanism with dealing with friends. But yeah.
Good to know. Really good to know. So before my second last question for our session is, you've been really talking about your faith. I think for you, without even realizing it, you've actually even quoted some scriptures without giving us a verse. So I won't say what your religion is or what you believe in. I'll let you say it. I'm very curious to find out, how has your faith helped you, during COVID, especially when it just hit us all in 2020? How did you manage to dig deep into your faith, and how did it help you and your loved ones?
Sure. I think one thing about faith is it's about believing in something that you don't have sufficient evidence that is there, right? And you don't have evidence you believe in it because you also believe in how it will manifest later, even though you don't have much control of how it manifests. So for me, part of being a person of faith is having positive expectations. I'm a natural optimist. I just believe that, you know what, after X period, this thing will go away. It, you know, that does. It actually puts the mind at ease. It takes away stress. It takes away this feeling of anxiety. Because a lot of people suffer from anxiety because they're afraid of, oh my God, what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm going to be finished. But so I look at faith even practically, you know, so it's like I make a decision like, you know what, okay, COVID is, it initially, it was very, it was a mystery because we weren't too sure to what extent it was going to affect us. Some people thought it was a complete death sentence. You get it, you're gone. So of course there was a lot of paranoia, but now we've realized, okay, fine. Yeah, it's got a mortality rate that averages, I don't know, 3%, which is still high, but, and of course it does inhibit a lot, commerce, you know, business, travel, hospitality, you name it. So I recognize, and of course was frustrated by the fact that, you know, I love, part of my work requires us to travel. But then I've also looked at the blessings, the silver linings. And that's another thing about being a person of faith, how it helps you, is that you look at the world more positively. You say, you know, everything has a reason, even the negative thing. So when COVID hit, of course, couldn't travel around. By the way, I've saved more money in my life in the last year than I have in any time in my life. One, because when I'm buying air tickets, when I'm staying in hotels, when I'm shopping, when I'm doing all the things that one does when they travel using foreign currency, I haven't done that in a long time. So that's the one positive. Second positive, look at what we're doing today. I got to know you during this COVID period, being able to basically utilize platforms like Zoom. Nobody used to use, well, I'm sure a few people use Zoom pre, you know, whatever, January or February 2020, but now we are all using Zoom, Teams, you name it. The companies that produce these things have done very well. More people, and we become more efficient. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's a knowledge exchange happening here. We're being efficient because we're having a conversation. I mean, you're in South Africa, I'm in Lusaka. All my board meetings for the last year have been on Zoom. I don't have to get in the car, go all the way to Zambia Breweries, which is like, you know, 45-minute drive from where I am. I can do it right in the comfort of my office or at home. That is so convenient. So there's a few other factors. Of course, it makes you appreciate things a lot more. You know, I can count all the negative things that have happened. People have lost loved ones. People have lost jobs. You know, economies have suffered. That's terrible. But I would say it never helps anybody to dwell on the negative. The negative outcomes of COVID would definitely have hurt people. And we're not saying ignore that. But we have to look, especially as life goes on, we certainly have to look at ways in which we mitigate it, ways in which we use it to our advantage, like the technology companies, they use it to their advantage. There's pharmaceutical companies that basically created, you know, vaccines and so on, and they're obviously doing extremely well. You've got technology companies, you've got delivery companies, you've got ways in which people want to use e-commerce. I mean, talk about Amazon and all these companies who will thrive during this period. So I'd say, you know, having positive expectations, looking at the silver linings, looking at all the things that have come out of it, and looking forward to a tomorrow. In fact, and I can use historical evidence as proof that when COVID eventually dies, which it will, or it become part of us, and it will be less of an inhibitor for our normal lives. You know, people hugging and, you know, interacting and traveling and so on. Especially when everybody gets vaccinated, or when we achieve herd immunity, because we did that with the Spanish flu, with many other pandemics. This is not the first and it won't be the last. We've had others before, but humanity has learned. So with that being the case, you find that after every pandemic or after every recession, economically, there's always an upswing in the economy. So we can expect a robust global economy after this period. And the other thing, by the way, just being perspicacious and aware of what's happening. If you saw the Forbes list last year, there were more new billionaires this year, this in 2020, than any other year. What does that mean? People are getting wealthier during COVID. And what else has happened? The Earth has, you know, somebody took a photo of New Delhi. New Delhi pre-COVID New Delhi after during COVID. New Delhi's sky was, you couldn't even see past a kilometer. You couldn't see buildings because the sky was filled with all this, call it, or carbon dioxide, sulfur, blah, blah, blah. I don't know the exact gases, but gases that are not so great for the human being. The picture that I was taking, the sky was clear. People could see beyond. Some people used to wear masks because of fumes, which was, I'm sure, affecting people's lungs. So the earth, in a way, has benefited from COVID. There's less, travel, these things, carbon emissions. So if you think of climate change and so on, COVID actually disrupted human activity that created more ecological harm or environmental harm. So again, silver lining, very important. And that's how, to wrap it up, faith, my faith in particular, has guided me during this COVID period.
Wow. Jito, in closing, it's very sad. I mean, I keep complaining every single time I'm having these moments with the facilitators that I wish I could be given one wish to just freeze time, because even for me, I'm getting to learn you all. I mean, like today, I'm really, yeah. So in closing, Jito, what is the one advice that you just want humanity to know? Just mostly I think I'm gonna ask you to give advice in three folds.
Okay.
One, to just humanity, everybody, globally. Second, to us here in Africa, because look, you and I are on the continent. What is that one advice or one thing that you can give as an advice to all of us living on this continent? And thirdly, what positive thought would you want us to carry from today until December?
Okay. You put me on the spot, but I'll do my best. The first is to humanity.
Yeah.
The first thing, my most important element of humanity, or at least being a human being, I touched on it before, but I'll go into it a little bit, is empathy and the power that empathy has. Everything can be so much better the more empathy we have. Whether you are in business, whether you're in politics, personal relationships, the more we take time to understand another person, the better we will be at dealing with crises, with conflict, the better we will be at developing products that brings about satisfaction in people. When you think of Jeff Bezos, when he talked about, how Amazon, which is now one of the biggest companies in the world, that's made him the richest man in the world, his entire ethos was customer obsession. That's an incredible concept. It's where you create a business that is so obsessed with how the customer experience is from the moment they log in, the moment they purchase something. Like there's that desire to satisfy the customer. That comes from empathy. That's, I'm thinking about you. How do I make you happy? Because if you are happy, I'm going to make money. Because you're going to come back and buy things from me because I've made your entire experience easy and fantastic. Same thing with personal relationships, friendships, not being selfish, not being rude. And I feel like it goes back to the golden rule in the Bible, treating others as we'd love to be treated, doing unto others as they love and do unto us. To me, that is the advice, the ultimate advice I could give to humanity, that if we focus on empathy, we focus on the idea, and empathy is wrapped in love. It's feeling of, I see you and I feel you. You may have insulted me, you may have treated me a certain way, but I forgive you. Because even in empathy, you can forgive others, because guess what? We are going to do things that will lead us to want to be forgiven ourselves. We're not perfect people. So we have to have that patience and that appreciation of other people's circumstances. So the first piece of advice I'll give to humanity is have empathy, because it's more powerful than you can ever imagine. It is not just an act of love or an act of, altruism for another person, being concerned for another person. It will serve you because it will affect how people treat you. It will give you power. And when I say power, you will have the ability to impact people in such an interesting way, because the more empathy you have, the better you are with people. The better you are with people, the more influence you have over those people. Influence, like I said, commercially, politically, organizationally, personally, romantically, you name it. All of that is driven by empathy. So that's one. Two, advice for Africans. Very important. Africans have to get to a point where we recognize our value in the world. We recognize that, where we are is a result of many things that have happened historically. Yes, we've had colonialism. Yes, the factors of slavery hit us. Global injustice, inequality. But let's also remember that we have a role to play in coming out of the situation. If you look at any bad situation where a person is mistreated or a situation is unfair or negative, if you begin to first of all reflect on, first of all, why am I so poor compared to everybody else? Why is there so much extraction of value from where I'm from, but there's no worth being realized here? Let me really get to a point where I investigate, and we investigate collectively. How do we collectively and fairly and equitably evaluate the roles that we can play in ensuring that we are collectively uplifting ourselves from the poverty that we're in, from the decrepit nature that we're in, into a situation where we now, become prosperous, that we have a seat at the international table where decisions are made that affect our lives every day, whether it be, the price of copper. Why is it driven by a group of people who sit out of London? Why is the biggest trader of copper in the world Switzerland? Or basically, when we are the place where a significant amount of copper is extracted from. There's reasons for that. We need to appreciate supply chain, value chain. Where is the value being created? Somebody will pay $1,000 for an iPhone. What's in that iPhone? There's cobalt, there's copper, there's coltan, there's all these things. Where are those things coming from? They're coming from Africa. And why? And those companies are worth trillions of dollars, worth more than the value of Africa combined. That is a travesty. And our humanity is being trodden on by the fact that we are not conscious of this. We have to participate. We're not saying that we want to, and it's not an act of, it's not an insult or a slight against anybody who benefits from Africa, but it's about us saying, wait a second, you know what, let me get involved. I'm going to sell this to you at the price that I believe is correct. And not only that, I will be a serious participant in its extraction, in its processing, all the way up to as far as I can get it in terms of value. If Elon Musk all the way in, somewhere in California is producing, vehicles that run on batteries, and I know that he buys cobalt, or cobalt is ultimately what's utilized in those batteries, and we've got tons of it here, then I need to set up a Tesla battery manufacturing factory, not just extracting powdered cobalt, which goes to be processed in China, which becomes a battery, which then goes to the US, and then China makes all the money. We need to now start saying, this is already here. We're going to do it from here. Give us your specs. We'll send it there. If we're not going to allow it to leave unless we're processing it ourselves. We need to think that particular way. And more importantly, it's all about collective gain, not about the enrichment of a few, but ultimately, if we create this sort of value, it will uplift everybody around us. And it goes back to empathy and community and Ubuntu. If my neighbor, my brother, my sister is going through problems, poverty, it's going to affect me one way or another. So this selfishness has to essentially not, it has to be overcome and really pursue the vision of collective responsibility in the process of uplifting ourselves from poverty into prosperity. To me, I would say that's my number one advice to Africans, and to think outside the box within the global context, not just within the African context. Our leaders have signed this Africa's Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is great. We can trade amongst each other, but there's a lot more money outside of Africa and a lot more value being generated out of people who consume African products. So we need to trade amongst each other, but ensure that whatever we're selling to the rest of the world, we're allocating it where it needs to go. So then the closing point, I'm trying to remember, but there were three parts. Yeah, one of the guys. Humanity.
Yes, I said, give us
positive. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you're right.
That can take us into December. I remember that. Okay, I would say that we have to remember that we are the most privileged generation as humanity in human history. We are the luckiest people. I'm sure people 100 years from now might be luckier than us. They might be saying this. Somebody 100 years ago must have been saying, guys, there's this thing called, the Wright brothers have just created this thing called an airplane. We are so lucky to be alive. Somebody says, look at what Henry Ford is developing. Yes, he didn't invent the automobile, but regardless, guys, we were on horses. Now we have this thing called a car. We are advanced. Guess what? We're at a time where technology is so advanced. The internet is really at its best point ever. It will get better with time, but the resources we have at our disposal to do incredible things, to create brands. We can use social media is a powerful tool. The internet is a powerful tool for commerce, for learning. The things that we get, you can do a master's. Fine, you can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a master's degree from Stanford University, or you can watch Stanford, classes on YouTube, which are free, and many other people tutoring on everything from accounting to corporate finance to marketing. You can learn all that for free. The only thing is that you don't get the validation of a certificate. Knowledge has become more accessible than at any other point in history. You know, the ability to build oneself is so high that you can literally create something out of nothing. We are at a time where there's excitement about a currency that doesn't exist in a physical realm, but in a digital realm, which is cryptocurrency. We're at a time where, you know, everything is changing so quickly, so rapidly, that whether it be wealth, whether it be other solutions that uplift people from poverty or become wealthy, is so incredibly high that if we keep our eyes open, eyes on the ball, that we could be on the cusp of changing our lives forever and for the better. So we need to take advantage of what we have at our disposal. Yes, there's a global pandemic, but the reality is we are fast approaching a time where it will come to an end. And by the time we're getting to December, it won't be a very big issue, because the world will open up. Because even with COVID fatigue, yes, more people will get COVID, and yes, there will be sadly more deaths, right? And that's part of life in terms of mortality. But there is great hope in the fact that we'll go back to normal soon. The economy the global economy will get back into high gear. People can't wait to hit the beach, to party, to hug each other, to travel, so we have to position ourselves as people to be on the receiving end of these things. When I say receiving end, I mean creating businesses that fulfill them. But the other hand is to be excited about a new world, you know, a new future, a new direction in which things will go. And our optimism should be based on what role we're going to play in how we're going to decide how the future is, and being conscious on the decisions that are being made and where we should sit when those decisions are made. And I think that ultimately is what I can leave people with. And, you know, my optimism, I'll tell you, I'm not a prophet, but I'll tell you, I know kind of what's going to happen a few years from now in my life, because I'm doing things that are making those things happen. So we have to be deliberate. You know, being deliberate is ultimately, and being clear with our plans is what essentially enables our futures to be shaped. Yeah.
Wow. And there it is. It's come to an end. What an afternoon. What a session. So Jito, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to dive in and get to know your life. And thank you for being vulnerable when you were. And just thank you for sharing so openly, as you always do. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great. So, wow, you heard it for yourself. So Jito has given us some insights, and I think he touched on a couple of issues that we all need to be deliberate. There are times that so many things are happening, especially that we see it. Nowadays, it is very easy to be negative. He walked us through a time in his life where it was hard. Anybody else would have given up. So for everybody that feels that they cannot, everybody that is being bullied, we need to make that decision. It's not about you. If you can't deal with it, find somebody that you can talk to and share what you're going through. And the other thing that I also took out of it is, let us be our brother's keepers. Let's love again. Let's learn the basics about life. Let's care about each other. I think if we start with these small little basics, then we can do life bigger. And let's start to plan. Let's start to save. Let's be excited about the new world. I love that. And I think it's the first time I'm hearing that in you know, from the time that I've started, you know, being very cautious and listening to what people are saying, where let's be very, very optimistic about the new world that is before us. COVID is here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere. We just are going to learn how to navigate it. So this is why these series are here. This is why these episodes are here, so that you can get to see that these people who are on the stage, these people that impact, teach, are always there to give of themselves, are as simple and as basic as you and me. And some of them have even gone through harder experiences in life, but it is the decision that they decided to make. As hard as it is, they have made a decision to be better. So guess what? You and I can make the same decision. So thank you once again for joining me for episode 8. So until next week when I bring somebody else, thank you so much for always being here. So wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and let's live large. Let's embrace our neighbor. Let's embrace our sister and our brother out there. I'll see you next week. Thank you.